In 21, we have another question involving constants. And again, this is a question type, whether it's with exponentials or quadratics or whatever, it tends to give students trouble as soon as we throw these letters in here, a and b. We already have x, we already have f of x. It seems quite overwhelming. But a good rule of thumb for questions involving constants, not the only strategy, but one very typical one, is if you have a point or points, or you can get a point or points, say from a graph or a table or figure or something, plug those in. Plug those in for x and for y, and use that to solve for a and b. And that's what we're going to basically do here, right? Because we're given this function, which is f of x equals a to the x plus b. And we know that this function has this as a y-intercept, and it passes through this point. What is the value of a plus b? So what we can do is just solve, basically, a system of equations. Given that I know 2 points, I'm going to be able to plug those points in and solve for a and b. Now, it actually turns out this point does a lot of the work for me, because once I plug this in, I'll be able to get rid of the value of a and basically find b immediately. So let's start with this, right? So we're going to go ahead, we're going to evaluate f of 0. So I'm going to plug in 0 for x. And we know this should result in negative 25, because that's the y value when x is 0. This is 1 plus b is equal to negative 25. So b is negative 26. Cool. So let's update our function. So f of x is equal to a to the x minus 26. This is where the second point is going to come in handy. I'm going to plug this in. I'm going to plug in x is 2 and y is 23. And then I've just got an equation in terms of a that I can solve. So f of 2 is equal to a squared minus 26, which is equal to 23. So a squared is equal to 49. So a would be 7. Or I guess negative 7, but they do say that a is positive. So let's just deal with the positive case. So now, what's the question want? It wants a plus b, which is 7 plus negative 26. And we get our final answer of negative 19. I'm sure there's a way you can do this with Desmos, with some fancy regression moves. For sure, if you're curious about that, you can look into it. I'm not going to go through it because the problem with it is it's somewhat brittle. Right? All we need to do, and we've seen this before in questions like this, is make some adjustments to the problem, and suddenly Desmos is less viable, or it's less obvious what to do. Like you can memorize, in this particular problem, this is how I'll use Desmos to get the answer. Tweak the problem, though, and suddenly that procedure doesn't work. And now what? Okay, now you got to remember another procedure, then another procedure. How about we understand the fundamentals here? I think that's my approach. It's like, let's understand the fundamentals, that if we can do it with Desmos, great, but if we can do it by hand, even better, because it allows us flexibility and adaptability. If you want to be a strong problem solver, you cannot be stuck in rigid ways of doing things. You need to be able to attack questions from multiple directions. So that's why, in general, what I like to preach for constants questions, one of the strategies that's very typical across many different types, whether it's exponentials or quadratics, plug in points. Sometimes you're given points. Sometimes you need to figure them out from other information. Plug in the points, and that will allow you to expose the constants basically as your unknowns, and then solve for them using algebra. So use that as a standard strategy across many questions. And again, it gives you options regardless of how they modify it. Like, what's one way they could have modified this? They could, for example, have given you information about a version of f of x which has been transformed in some ways, right? If they said f of x minus 18 is this function g of x, and then gave you information about g of x, suddenly things get a bit more complicated. Again, probably still Desmosable, but you'd have to remember, okay, in this situation where this happens, I use Desmos this way versus that. It's good to know, but overall, I think it's better to have these fundamentals down because you will be more flexible, more adaptable. So this one is going to be negative 19.